Alrighty team, it is time for a proof of concept and also another new bullet journal setup, but today we are setting up a 2023 bullet journal with cheaper supplies. This setup came from my Can You Bullet Journal on a Budget video, where I got a full set of bullet journal supplies for less than $20 US. That cost including the notebook, the pens, the ruler, the whole kit and caboodle effectively. Flipping into this one though, you can see that the first thing I'm doing is actually sticking the front page to the front cover, just because with the pages being stuck together, just a structural thing in the notebook, it is a little bit more difficult to use. In some of my more expensive notebooks, I'd probably very gently pull the pages apart just so that it was a little bit more usable, but because this is a cheaper notebook, I decided it would probably be better just to stick this one to that front cover. Really easy to do this though, just putting in some double-sided tape and then bringing the two pages together. With that double-sided tape, I do make sure to go very close to the edges so that I don't have any kind of peeling of one page from the other, or in particular so that I don't think it is two separate pages. I mean, it is technically two separate pages, but I don't want to try and flip into my notebook and think that the pages aren't supposed to be stuck together and end up bending the pages. I'm not too sure if that makes sense. Hopefully it makes sense. But coming into the first full dog grid spread, we're going to be starting with a grid spacing guide. Having this at the front of the notebook can be very useful, just as a reference, so that anytime you're setting up a layout and you're not too sure on the spacing or want to quickly figure out the different divisions that you can use for the page, you can flip to this one and it's got all that information there for you. In my personal bullet journal, I prefer to use a grid spacing ruler so that it's separate and I can actually take it to the page that I'm working on. But having the grid spacing guide set up in your bullet journal is also really common in the community. In terms of the spacings that I've set up on this one, I have a pink line to mark in the halfway points, both vertically and horizontally. So if I want to divide the page in half either way, I've got that as a reference. I've also got numbers running down and across the page so I can see how many dot grid spaces we have. So not how many rows of the dot grid itself, but how many gaps effectively, because I like to work with gaps rather than dots. I've also marked in the third way points, just using a dashed green line, and for each of those dividers you'll see that I have two dashed green lines next to each other, and that's because when dividing the page into thirds, to actually get nice even thirds, where you've still got those lines in line with the dots, then you end up with a space in between each of the sections. I do have a full video on grid spacing guides that might be useful if you wanted a little more information on this one, but on the right hand side I'm setting up a goals layout. I love goal setting and planning, so in my bullet journals I do like to do quite a few different goal related layouts. This one's fairly simple, it's just got the page split into 3 separate sections, going from top to bottom, or what we would call 3 horizontal sections, and each of those is themed around a different goal area. And the areas that I picked for this one are learning, development, and fun. I guess technically you could kind of think of learning and development as being quite similar, but if you were setting up a layout like this for yourself, I do encourage you to think about what categories would actually resonate with you. As mentioned, all of the supplies that I'm using are on the cheaper side, so when I was picking the materials, I was very careful to stay away from any kind of pens that are too inky or too fluid in their ink. Because this paper is thinner, I don't want to have any bleed through and I want to minimize ghosting as much as possible. So I've decided to use common ballpoint pens. And you can see that I'm going with a color palette that is pink, green, and also a tan color from the Kraft paper. This Kraft paper is actually also super cheap because it's actually just brown paper bags ripped up. The nice part is that to get a Kraft paper quote aesthetic, you don't actually have to go and buy specialty paper, you can just use the brown paper bags that you get at the supermarket. To stick those down though, I am using a double-sided tape runner, and this one I also found at my budget store, which, because I'm in New Zealand, is Kmart, and it actually works really well. I am totally gonna go buy that one again. But as you can see, we have finished the first spread and we are very much well and truly on to the second one, this one being the future log. For this future log, I'm keeping things also super simple. I've used that Kraft paper or the brown paper bags to add some decoration or visual interest to the spread, just by sticking it in the top left and bottom right corners. The structure of this future log is fairly simple, so we just have 6 boxes per page, 3 along the top, 3 along the bottom for each of them, to give us the 12 boxes for the 12 months of the year. The idea with the future log is that you would record any future events here, because in a bullet journal you kind of build as you go. You don't necessarily have monthly calendars set up for months that are happening in the future, so this spread just acts as a place to capture all of those future events. While I alternated the colours of the outlines of the boxes, anywhere that they went into the craft paper sections, I just did that part of the outline in black. This trick is pretty common, but I think it's really visually effective. Once all of the outlining was done though, it was then time to jump in with my Crayola Super Tips, which is a nice cheap pen, and add in a little bit more decoration. One of the things that I used to tie all of the pages of this setup together, making them look cohesive, were repeated elements of little hearts, along with the other repeated elements of the craft paper, the style of headers, the colour palette, those kind of things. With the future log done though, it's time to flip on over to the 24 before 2024 page, or effectively a place to list out 24 things to do before the year of 2024. I kind of prefer the idea of 24 before 2024 rather than 23 in 2023, just because 24 is a much nicer number to split evenly on the page. You can have 2 columns of 12, you could have 3 columns of 8. It's just a much more convenient number, unlike 23, which is a prime number, which just doesn't split nicely onto the page. Despite this, I didn't actually end up with an equal number of tasks per column because I wanted to put more of that craft paper decoration down in the bottom right. An extra element that I put on this craft paper to make it a little more decorative was a dotted black line to kind of make it look like it was stitched into the notebook. So that you can see what this layout might look like once it's fully populated, I do also go in and write in a bunch of hypothetical tasks that this person might want to add to their 24 things before 2024 list. While Past Jess is filling those in, let's talk about timing. It can be kind of hard to get an accurate picture of how long these layouts actually take when everything is time-lapsed. So for the timing of our first page, where we just stuck one piece of paper to the other, this one came in at approximately 1 minute. Not a lot going on that one, so fairly speedy. When it came to the grid spacing guide, this one was about 10.5 minutes from first touch of the pen, and then the goals layout on the right hand side of that spread took only 5. Of course, there was then also some extra time filling in the hypothetical goals for our hypothetical person, but I haven't included the example population of the spreads in the time taken because you wouldn't necessarily write those out if you were setting these up for yourself. I see setting up time and population time to be separate things. When it came to the future log, this one was a little bit more time expensive, so that one was 18 minutes roughly. And then the page we're working on here took about 10. Heading over to the right hand side though, this one took 16. On the right hand page, because I wanted this to balance nicely with the one on the left, I decided to put the craft paper at the spine edge of the journal, just in the top left corner this time. But this page is for monthly challenges. So we have a box for each month of the year where our hypothetical person could write in the challenges that they want to undertake. I love monthly challenges. I just think it's a fun way to focus on something in particular for a shorter period of time. So for instance, a month where you actively try to exercise every day, or a month where you actively try to get 2 liters of water intake each day. Of course, those are both health-related examples. You can have fun challenges as well. So maybe a month of daily doodles, or a month where you do gratitude journaling for each day. Monthly challenges can just be a fun way to help you action your goals, almost in a way that kind of gamifies them. I like goal gamification. I did actually end up making a mistake on this page, so I flipped to the back of the journal to cut out a little extra paper. On that page you can see the pen swatch that I did in this notebook to make sure I was using pens that were gonna work well, but I'm just taking that spare piece of paper and sticking it over the mistake so that I can write the correct header in the correct box. Flipping on over to our next spread though, the first page we're setting up on this one is a media consumed page. Much like the goals layout, I am setting this one up with 3 separate sections, so one for movies, one for books, and one for TV shows. Because I wanted to do faux-ligraphy on this one, or fake calligraphy, and I wanted to use the black pen in particular, I decided to write this one on the craft paper and then rip it out to make my headers, just because I didn't want to put that much ink down on the page in one place. I felt that that would probably lead to some bleed through, and I didn't really want that for this journal. I mean, I don't really ever want bleed through in any of my journals. But because this one was a proof of concept journal, the idea of like, can we actually use cheap supplies to get a somewhat aesthetic journal. I don't really like to describe my journals as aesthetic, but hopefully you get the idea. We want something that was going to look nice, we didn't want bleed through, and we wanted to use cheap supplies to do it. But for the TV shows, movies, and books lists, we've just separated the page into thirds and then put little green circles as the bullets to write out the titles beside those. Because TV show and movie titles are typically shorter than book titles, I've put 2 columns for each of those and only 1 for the books. Also because typically I would like to write out the book's author along with the title, so need a little bit more space for that one. In terms of timing, this one took 9 minutes from first touch of the pen, and then we're over onto the right hand side of the spread to set up a when did I last tracker. This one is pretty much what it sounds like. It's effectively a place to record when you last did something. And I'm setting this one up using the Alastair method. I do have a separate video on the Alastair method if you haven't come across it. But effectively we have a column for each of the months of the year, and I'm just writing those out with their initials, so J for January, F for February, etc. And then beside this we have the list of tasks. So what are the things that you actually care about when you last did them? Whenever those things get done, you can then just put a tick underneath the relevant month, or you could write in the number for the day of the month that it happened on. So for instance, if something happened on the 24th of January, you could write the number 24 underneath the first J, of course, right across from the actual task that you're referring to. Hopefully that makes sense, but as mentioned, I do have a separate video on that one, and you can find any other relevant videos linked in the description box below. Heading into the flip through for this journal, I think we very much proved that yes, you can set up a nice looking bullet journal with cheaper supplies. You don't have to buy an expensive notebook or expensive pens to get the job done. Of course, they can be nice. The holidays are coming. You might want to ask for it as a present, but do not let your supplies hold you back. If you wanted even more new bullet journal inspiration, then I do have a playlist of all of my setups, including the 4 other notebooks that I have set up for the year ahead. Click or tap on that playlist here and I'll see you over there.